Hello everyone, I've got a really useful C1 level phrase for you today, and it's particularly useful for your spoken English. We don't use it so much in writings, especially not formal writings, but it's really good for colloquial conversation. And that phrase is let alone, let alone. Or in perhaps more natural British English pronunciation, we'd say let alone, let alone. So we have that glottal stop, the T is not pronounced clearly. So what does let alone mean and how do we use it? Well, it's used in negative sentences to indicate that something is even more improbable or difficult than something else. So it's used to emphasize the contrast between two different situations. So if the first situation we mention in the sentence is very unlikely or very improbable, then the second situation is impossible, basically. So this is a complicated one, isn't it? As most of the vocabulary that I teach in these short videos tends to be. But let's look at some examples to make sure you really get a good idea of how and when we use this phrase. I can't boil an egg, let alone cook a fancy 3-course meal. So when I say I can't boil an egg, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit or maybe not, but what I'm saying is that it's very difficult for me to boil an egg. It's impossible for me. So to cook a fancy 3-course meal is definitely completely impossible. I'm using that contrast between the two actions in this case to really emphasize that this is just impossible. It's so difficult for me. Okay, let's look at another example. Amy couldn't catch a fly, let alone a rabbit. So for those of you who don't know, Amy is my dog. Amy couldn't catch a fly, let alone a rabbit. So if she finds it difficult or impossible to catch a fly, what chance does she have trying to catch a rabbit? It's pretty much impossible. Another example, to be honest, she would struggle with the C1 advanced exam, let alone the C2 Proficiency. Now I know a lot of you preparing for the Cambridge English exams, so you can relate to this. So I'm imagining that somebody has asked me their advice regarding taking an exam, and I'm saying that this student is going to find the C1 Advanced very difficult, so she shouldn't even think about the C2 Proficiency, let alone the C2 Proficiency. That's impossible, or that would be impossible for her. Let's look at one more example now. We can't even afford to repair the oven, let alone buy a new car. So in this case, we're talking about money. We can't afford to repair the oven, so we don't have enough money to even repair the oven, which requires less money than buying a new car, but that's obviously completely impossible. If we can't afford to repair the oven, if we don't have enough money to repair the oven, then of course we can't even think about buying a new car. Okay, so you can see the way we use this phrase to really emphasize the contrast and really to make it clear to the person we're speaking to that this thing is impossible. Okay, have you thought about what the equivalent expression is in your own language? Share it in the comments, maybe translate it from your language literally, translating the words directly into English. I think that would be interesting. I'm sure you have some kind of phrase or expression to express the same idea. Okay, I'll see you in my next video.